Today we're sitting down with Ken Park from Ion Digital to discuss their innovative approach to gold markets and how our partnership with them is reshaping our digital banking security. Before we dive in deeper, let's go ahead and get some introductions done. I'll go first really quickly. I'm Julia Main. I'm the marketing lead at Instruxi, and I will be helping moderate today. You can go ahead, Ken.
My name is Ken Park. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and a Director at Ion Digital Corp.
Mathew Harrowing. I am the co-founder with Austin of Instruxi and the CEO. Good to be here, guys. And good morning to you both.
Good
It's always
morning.
good to be with you, Matt. It's always a pleasure.
Truly, truly.
Thanks.
All right, thank you
That
both.
sounded genuine, Ken. That sounded absolutely genuine. I'm touched.
Well, it is genuine, number one, but even if it wasn't genuine, the whole goal is to make it sound very believable.
Oh, you've nailed it. You've nailed
I
it.
am a marketing guy. I'm a marketing
You've
guy. I got
nailed
to do
it.
that. So,
Okay, thank you both. Let's start with something that I've had the privilege of hearing about straight from Ken himself, and that's Ion's different approach when it comes to traditional gold companies and how y'all deal with virtual mining. Can you walk us through how this idea came about?
yeah, and it's very interesting. It was at a time, we've been in the industry. We're one of the pioneers in the industry. And it came about from a very simple concept, and that was the traditional mining ecosystem requires junior mining companies that own land and have reserves to typically go and get very large loans from banks and individual investors that end up giving away a majority of the equity so that they can pull the gold out of the ground and then distribute that gold through the marketplace. By the time it's done, the margins are very slim. The risks are very large because they don't always know exactly what's down there. And there's just it's a broker's business. And what I mean by that is that, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing that has always gone on in the gold market, as you can imagine. So it was always a kind of a tumultuous industry to begin with. And so this was back prior to the formation of Ion. Uh, I was in a company along with Carlos X Montoya, the CEO of Ion, and we're looking at a new way of financing gold reserves, and we were using emerging blockchain technology as the validation of ownership. So that we could then turn that ownership, that proven ownership, into a digitized security, and then that security could be used as a collateral device, a hypothecation device for financing purposes. So Carlos, whose background is in banking, he's a very established, very respected banking executive, really brought to the idea the the compliance and kind of regulatory belt and suspenders, if you will, to the process. And it was important for him to really maintain the level of balance in the valuation of this gold. So he created a model, a business model that said, okay, for every 5 ounces of gold that's in the ground, we're going to create digital value for 1 ounce. And we're going to then hold that gold, basically an escrow, if you will, or in kind of like a mortgage-backed agreement for a lifespan of 10 years. And during that time, you'll be able to take this marketable digital security and exchange it in the marketplace, from a more of a traditional banking style at the beginning. So it was you take it to your bank, you'd put it on your balance sheet. That would enhance your financials so you could go to a bank and get better terms on your loan, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the genesis of the idea. I think what got very exciting for all of us is the emergence of what we call virtual mining. As we look into the marketplace and we kind of take a look at, the destructive nature of mining and what it leaves behind in its wake, there's just tremendous negative impact on Mother Nature. And so if we could create a mechanism that allowed us to assign and leverage the value of the gold in the world's most secure vault, which is Mother Nature, planet Earth, then we could do the same thing that you would do if the gold bullion was sitting in a safe over in the corner, is that, there's proven value there. Let's take that value, let's turn it into financial instruments that can actually be used in the marketplace, and that generates economic churn and transactional value. And so this idea of virtual mining not only became interesting. So in situ gold is what we digitize. We can also digitize, bullion and other forms of unrefined gold. But I think that the really sexy story is the in situ gold, because there's just so many gold reserves in the United States alone that you will never be able to take out the gold and make it marketable, because the restrictions and the regulations on what you can and can't do environmentally prohibit that. So now we can go into those, mines and those reserves, and we can use state-of-the-art technology to really assess how much gold is in the ground, how much gold is in that planet Earth vault, and we can then assign, currency value, liquidity value to it, and create investment opportunities and expansion opportunities and other, vehicles in what is emerging to be an incredibly exciting, real world asset backed marketplace. And so we've kind of grown into this incredibly, safe, stable approach towards stable coins, if you will. So, stable coins got a very bad reputation because a lot of times what would happen is there was no stable behind the coin. There was nothing that was really there asset wise. And so we've always had this obsession with proving the value of the gold that is there, that's in the ground, using that 5-to-1 ratio to protect against any potential miscalculation as to how much gold is in the ground, and then turning that gold into marketable securities that could generate economic activity in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think eco-friendly blockchain anything is definitely a plus for everyone in this
See,
industry.
you said it better in one sentence. This is the problem with me, and Matt knows that, is you said one sentence, I said 16 paragraphs to get to the same end goal that you just summarized. I think you're the better marketer, and I think I might be losing a job after this interview. So that's a problem.
That is sweet, Ken, but you explained it great. Honestly, I love the way that you explained it because it is important. In this industry, I think a lot of people are starting to be concerned about the effect that we're having on nature, especially when it comes to Web3, anything in AI and blockchain. It's starting to look pretty detrimental. So it's incredible to see companies like Ion Digital making a space where there is eco friendliness.
Well, and we've been lucky enough to have a relationship with Instruxi from very early on in the story I just told. And it's people like Matt and Austin that have brought to our attention, to your point, with the opportunity always comes a downside. And so the idea that there's going to be this massive digitization of every asset you could ever imagine: gold, precious metals, minerals. But then you get even, obviously real estate, but you get into abstract concepts too. And the challenge is not the excitement of the model. The challenge is to prove ownership of that underlying asset and prove the existence of that underlying asset. And I think we've always benefited from the forward thinking data approach that Instruxi brings to the table, because we can then put into kind of a more of a programmatic mindset all of these really important onboarding characteristics or tests that we go through to make sure that there's validity in the gold that we're actually digitizing. And that is such an important, that onboarding process for us is so important to what we've always stood behind, so that we could provide stability and verifiability. That's been the essence of why we've been so excited, not only utilizing emerging technologies in the Web3 space, but to working with innovators like Instruxi in creating systems that really do a good job of validating and verifying the existence of that asset, digitizing that asset, and then facilitating the trading and distribution and transactional value of that asset. If you can do that across all three of those, modes, then you're doing something truly revolutionary. And I think that Ion is doing exactly that.
Thanks for saying that, Ken. It
Definitely.
definitely is it's been our hypothesis from the start that really you can't have a ecosystem where value is transferred unless you can actually prove the value and create a golden thread from where that value is booked and how that value is booked and be completely transparent. I think the trust me gov smart contract approach that we've seen over the last few years, this asset is real, um, is problematic, and it's really how we see Chainlink playing such a vital role in this ecosystem and in what we're doing collectively between our two firms. So completely agree. It's really about how we see value and what we see. And if I may go off piste a sec, Julia,
May.
this concept of value is really interesting because how we determine value from a retail perspective, it tends to be fairly straightforward. We see something and we say that we can buy or sell that, but from a business perspective, value is distributed very, very differently. We have value stored in a balance sheet in various different areas, like our brand has value, our data has value. These are intangibles. Are the things that
Identity has
identity,
value.
brilliant. Yes, identity has value. And so businesses are very, very good at identifying value and commercializing value. And what we're starting to see is that this value is really being represented. The stuff in the hidden areas of the balance sheet, we're starting to see like patent value, IP value, these types of things. These things can now have liquidity. They can be traded. They can be invested in and shared. Um, so I like the approach there.
And I also, just to give props to, I think, Carlos came into this original company, which was called Orbitz, and really took a beating. He took a beating from a lot of the founders and a lot of the partners that we were forming relationships with because he was just steadfast in his commitment to to make sure that this was done in a way that we could secure the financial value, and that we could validate the financial value, that there was regulatory constraints around what we were doing. And this was way before some of the ugliness did appear of, instruments and different, coins, ICO offerings, et cetera, that had very little behind them, but that we were just kind of, cashing in on the exuberance and the excitement in the marketplace. And Carlos was steadfast is we don't need to go to the consumer. We need to make a tier one financial instrument that can be utilized at the highest level of the financial totem pole and make sure that it meets and exceeds their requirements. And if we can do that, this becomes a peg or a building block in a new financial model built on the emerging technologies of Web3. And I think that was the formation of Ion, is that he held to that belief. And while others fell by the wayside, he pushed forward. And I know it's one of the things I remember so vividly, if I can share this, Matthew, as we sat at a dinner very early in our relationship with Matthew and Austin and Instruxi. And we went through the asset digitization portion of the story I just told Julia. And I remember looking across the table, and Matthew, who has this incredible presence but can be very stoic if he wants to, was very stoic at that moment. And he said, that story, what you just told about asset digitization. Now, granted, we were one of the pioneers in gold, but at this time, Instruxi's talking to every asset class that's out there is thinking about digitization. And he made that clear, is there's nothing novel per se at what you're talking about, with the exception that you're focused on in-situ gold. He was very drawn to that idea and all the inherent benefits of it. Um, But he he also was very brutal in saying that's not a differentiator per se in an exploding marketplace. Carlos then went about talking about the onboarding process and the banking side of this story. And that's when Matthew leaned across the table and said, "You are onto something huge." Because what we were doing, back to Matthew's earlier point, it's one thing to say you have value, it's even more important to prove that you have value, but then you've got to turn that value into transactional reality. And to do that, you have to play by the rules of an economy that has certain guardrails and has certain regulatory compliance protections. And his insistence on following those regulatory compliant guardrails is why we're here today. It was a commitment to the banking principles that is his pedigree. And I think as a result, it was the perfect combination of the innovation and forward thinking nature of Instruxi. And it's why the partnership has done so well through a long period of tumultuous market change. It's changed dramatically since when we started talking to Instruxi. But the foundational principles were innovation and best in class technology, meeting up with best in class banking principles, and all that entails. And I think that was one of the true value propositions that was established day one. I don't know if you agree wholeheartedly with that, Matthew, but that's what I always tell the story.
I firstly thank you for allowing my ADHD at that dinner table to just vomit words in without any sugarcoating, coming out as that bit's good, that bit's bad, and we still have a relationship to this day. Completely, because it's really so there is an entire ecosystem that has been built over hundreds and hundreds of years in determining what value is from a business perspective. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to make sure that that is represented truly and accurately on chain, and that there is a golden thread between the on and the off chain, and then the market can determine whether it likes the value we're presenting, whether it's attracted to that. And I think the thing that I kind of enjoyed about that first conversation is a lot of retail banks, domestic banks in the US. I think there's about 6,000 banks in the US. Most of them are mid-tier with
Yep.
less than 10 billion in revenues. Huge number. They don't really have access to this kind of tech at the moment. Of course, they can move into that. So one, I thought, wow, fantastic marketplace. But two, these guys are moving in and out of using gold in liquidity all the time, in putting it as a percentage of their reserves, and that's a real problem. Of course, there are systems in place that they're using today to do that, but because of the physical nature of it, there are storage costs. There are just lots and lots of costs that are heaped into this process. So, if the regulatory framework and the supporting valuation frameworks all agree that this has value, and that value can be digitized, and there is sufficient liquidity associated to that value, and therefore it can be used to support strengthening or your balance sheet in various different ways, using it as an asset, then it's a really interesting use case for taking an asset in ground.
Well, and I also think if you look at, you just brought up such a pivotal point, and that is in all aspects of gold, using gold as the basis for, the solvency of a bank, for instance, and a certain amount of their reserves being in bullion, et cetera, et cetera. There's always this idea of storage that you brought up. But there's even more importantly, there's always this idea that I promise it's over there. I promise it's right over there in the vault, right? Fort Knox. I promise the gold is. How
Oh,
many
you can't
people have
say
actually
that.
walked
It's
through?
not live.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. But the reality is that there's always this promise of
US dollar
its
gets crushed.
existence. Yeah, that's true. Can we erase that? No. But I think that's one of the exciting aspects of this is that there is with the explosion in popularity of RWA, digitization, and tokenization comes with it a necessity to really hone in on and focus on the ownership, the clear ownership, and the existence of the asset. And if there is an asset, and this goes back to your point you just made, if there is an asset, if we all agree that there is an asset and it's verifiable, what we're working on in every asset category is a game changer across the board because it allows us to monetize the value quicker, more effectively, and with greater transparency. So there is actually greater protection in the faster paced transactional opportunities associated with this, but also with safety and transparency and solvency and compliance, et cetera. And so we're sitting in a very, very exciting space. We've made gold our obsession, specifically the in-situ gold, but the banking controls are probably even more of our obsession, making sure that we're approaching it with transparency and solvency and regulatory compliance and diversification of assets. We do want to have bullion and in situ. We do want to have different instruments. We do want to have, making sure that we have liquidity management. These are all things that are banking principles that are part of Ion's strategy. And that's a testament to the banking pedigree that this company has been built on. So I think it's one of the differentiators. I think it's one of the strengths, and I think it's one of the reasons that we've had the staying power in what has been a very fast-moving, rapidly changing industry.
So just a bit of hygiene, if I may. I can see that people are pinging with questions, but unfortunately I can't see what those questions are. So I promise to anyone watching we will get to them.
Yes.
Just make them up, and we'll just. This is where Julia, you sit in and you say, "Listen, here's a question from Ohio," and then boom, you just make something up, and then we answer it, and then everyone goes, "Wow, I didn't get on, but that was a good question from Ohio." So
you're a pro at this, obviously, Ken.
Yes, you can tell you've been doing this.
So I'm kind of interested you specifically because you've got an unusual background and
truly like behind me.
I know it's really cool. There's skateboards up there, and I know so. Julia's got an agenda, and she's going to hate me for this. Tell us how you got here. I'm kind of stunned because can you just give us a little bit of your golden thread?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. So the reference is I was a professional skateboarder back in the late 80s. I was a finance major. So I was going to college and being a professional skateboarder, which was unique at the time because most of my contemporaries, which I love, were just the creative geniuses that, kind of skateboarding was built at that time on people that didn't fit the norms of school or society, and that were rebelling a little bit.
So you got paid to skateboard?
I got paid to travel the world and skateboard in front of people, which is pretty great way to start your career. Although it has its pitfalls because I was so passionate about my career that you then set that as the benchmark for your career. So you can't do something that you're not passionate about. It just doesn't work, So, but I think that the interesting story is I got onto the business side of skateboarding and I started using a computer to do everything: ad layout, board designs, clothing designs. I was sitting and I was using Prodigy and CompuServe as the internet started to make its emergence, just purely because I was fascinated as a marketer and as a business person on these new technologies. And I was introducing people to AOL chat rooms before everyone knew about them. And I just thought it was fascinating because I thought that the internet held an unlimited potential to level the playing field and to allow small lifestyle passion categories to have an ecosystem that was real. If you loved needlework, you could create a needlework community, and you could make that community something that is the focal point of your career and your job and your passion and your community, etc. And so I fell in love with those aspects. But what I was really falling in love with, Matthew, is the power of technology, not knowing it at the time. It was, the evolution of technology started to kind of sink into my soul. And as marketing technology started to evolve, I started to get more and more and more into technology from a marketing and an engagement standpoint. Um, and I happened to be, working. I was at Prodigy in the media department, dealing with this kind of at the same time that Prodigy, which is probably a name that not everyone recognizes, but at one point they were neck and neck with AOL, and they had the communities of interest nailed. The business model was absolutely much better than AOL's. There's no doubt about it. The technology was much better than AOL's, but AOL was winning the taste test. AOL was winning the "you've got mail, I like this, someone's talking to me in my computer" kind of mindset. And so AOL in the end won. But I was in the media department on music and entertainment, and then I ended up evolving past that into a technology-based marketing agency, and I had a dream of being one of the first digital production studios in New York City, making content exclusively for online distribution, which at the time seemed like I was talking about just absolute, uh, crap. Nobody understood it. Nobody believed in it. But I really thought that the internet was gonna change the way that content was distributed. And so I fell in love with technology, and I was introduced to a variety of people, one of which is as a common friend. And, I was brought in to do the storytelling, the marketing of high-tech projects that were trying to do very innovative things in technology. And my job was to tell the story in kind of layman's terms so that the marketplace and the customer base would understand it. And I found myself getting into cutting edge technology and enjoying it. And then I took a little bit of time and I was in the enterprise IT space selling big servers and storage, Hadoop storage and things of that nature, which was the first distributed technology. And I started to see the potential of that. And I just found myself always gravitating into technology. I was invited to come down to Florida to do exactly that, to be a marketing representative of a company that was doing data harmonization for the hospital and healthcare industry. And just a no-brainer, right? Making sure that systems could share data, talk to each other in a common language so that the healthcare data that follows us around could actually, simultaneously be serving our end goal, which is to be healthier. And I had to tell that story, and there was a bunch of really, pretty proven executives sitting around a table, and I had to go in there and kind of take all of their various versions and turn them into a story that they could all tell their own way. And that was my big, kind of foray into, because at the time they were using emerging, blockchain strategies to do that, and distributed data lakes and things of that nature. And one thing led to another, and before I knew it, that same entity was the kind of parent entity for Orbitz that I introduced earlier. And so I got very excited about the application, and I always have been very excited about the application of technology in real world solutions. And so that's why I'm here,
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. It's quite
Yeah.
quite a journey.
I had
Yeah, it
no
is a journey. And along the way, I have been lucky and blessed to bump into soothsayers, really, people that saw a future in technology in it. I'm not that person. I am the person that interprets. Yeah, if you were Jesus, which you at times have acted very much like Jesus, no, but like I would be, I would be one of your followers, and I would be interpreting
My goodness.
things that I didn't necessarily understand everything you were saying, but the gist and kind of the impact and the solution specific aspects of it, I got, and then I'd become a follower, I'd become a disciple, and I would then speak to others about this message. And technology is like that, isn't it? Isn't that kind of the community of technology? There's always people like Austin that are so far looking so far ahead and applying things because they love to apply things that it's not it's definitely understood by the core group around that is like-minded, but there's always the need for someone to step up onto the mountain and say, you know what these brilliant guys are doing over here? They're doing something that's going to change the world, and let me put it into context so that you fully understand why. And I've always found myself being amongst that group of people telling the story to others so that they could better understand what the real geniuses and brilliance was, brilliant people were doing.
Yeah, this is kind of it's really interesting. Two thoughts come to mind. So firstly, for 10 years we've been listening to blockchain bad, blockchain very bad, and then even on every government agency has been trying to crush this technology, and even people who
Yeah.
started in the industry now say blockchain bad. But then the so technology 2019 blockchain and the blockchain market and the industry is not the same as the technology today. It has evolved. And if I may say to anyone listening, if the last time you did a pilot was back in 2020, it's a completely different world now, and time to take another look. Things have changed. And
Well, the
and
great story that I'll tell about that is back in 2017, I went to a healthcare conference, and it was a blockchain healthcare conference. That's all we were talking about. And it was just buzzing and euphoric and all this. And then one gentleman gets up on stage and says, why are we using blockchain for this?
yeah, yeah.
We don't need to use blockchain for this. Blockchain is a tool to be used for other values and other reasons. We don't need block. So it's like everyone. I felt like everyone turned around and looked at each other like, "Ooh, what's that?" That's a really controversial statement. But I think that's what drew me to the original premise of Ion, is that blockchain was being used for a very specific, and I think it made logical sense, purpose to say, okay, if we can validate ownership and then kind of turn it into bite-sized pieces that people can buy, then we can actually sell gold in a very different way than it's been sold historically. And we can also, offset some of these challenges that you mentioned earlier, the physical movement, the physical storage, the physical validation, and the kind of, at times fraudulent representation of what is and isn't there. And I think that that's where the blockchain and the Web3 technologies start to get exciting when it comes to, precious metals, gold, minerals, things of that nature.
Yes, that's a good place to loop back actually. Just to get a little more into Instruxi's solutions with Ion. I'm particularly interested in how security and RID solutions are helping with your platform right now. Do you and Matthew both want to give your perspectives on why this matters?
Mine's going to be an easy segue to what I had stated earlier. Once again, the pedigree of Ion is a banking mindset. It's a tier one financial institution mindset. How do we do what we're trying to do in an explosive RWA digitization tokenization space and still maintain the guardrails of a banking regulatory compliant kind of construct. And in banking, KYC, so know your customer, and AML, anti-money laundering, are foundational aspects of banking. You got to know who your customer is, if they're reputable, if they're going to do transactions that are accepted everyday good transactions, or if they're trying to do fraudulent activities, and you're trying to protect against the risks that come with that. And so these banks are just taking on cost and complexity, and they're building, by the way, on top of antiquated data systems, and they're building layer upon layer upon layer. And we think there's a unique and powerful moment in front of us right now to go in and use the efficiencies and the scalability and the agility of Web3 technologies, specifically Instruxi's, data mesh technologies, and construct a better form of KYC, a better form of AML, a better form of onboarding of our digital assets, a better form of managing transactional um, uh, volume and making sure that identity is attached to everything, that the person that is trying to do this transaction is enabled through the security layer to do that actual transaction or to access that piece of data to facilitate that transaction. So there's just tremendous security benefits as to the way that the data mesh ID construct was developed, and we're like, this can change, especially going back to Matthew's point. There are banks right now, the biggest banks in the world are investing in their own systems, and there's going to be a bunch of proprietary systems out there. But it's the mid-tier regional banks there's a lot of them, and that they're not going to build their own system, that they need something that's built with the same principles that they've come to expect from all of their IT systems, the security, the transparency, the integrity, et cetera, and that they can take advantage of this explosion in digital assets. And we are going to use the Instruxi know-how that we built around, Ion's core technology, which is gold digitization, and then we're also going to add onto it the value that you've put into this, kind of next generation KYC and AML, and not only represent that as a platform that can just be plug and play and compliant and regulatory approved, et cetera, into these banks, but also to go and use that same tool set to address some of the data issues that are legacy data issues inside of a bank. And who better to do that than people that have built some of the world's largest banks, Carlos Montoya, others on our board. These are bankers by mindset. So one thing that Matthew has always kind of beaten into my head is that these are incredibly powerful data tool sets that we're putting together. The stack that we've developed is unique on how it approaches gold, but the components and the integration of all these technologies can be applied to a myriad of solutions. Well, if we just focus in on the banking solutions that are required, we're going to be able to resell and distribute the technical know-how of Instruxi and allow us to go in there and construct tools and platforms and solutions that we can then offer a large number of mid-tier, regional banks that are desperately in need of wanting to take advantage of this changing marketplace. And so that's a huge business opportunity, and I think we're in a pole position to take advantage of it.
That's pretty cool, and I love the fact that you've identified what I think is a great market. From an Instruxi perspective, we just want to be an enabler. We see ourselves as the plummet, really, and people with the experience have the use cases. We feel that we're really good at interoperability, and we're really good at creating hybrid frameworks, blending Web 2 and Web 3, bringing the best of both worlds. So what you just said there is really important conceptually. So how we govern things in a single cloud system is we identify who you are, we give you policies about what you can do, and we provide access to places of where you can do those things. Now, excuse me, in a distributed environment, that gets harder because we have lots and lots of systems where we're trying to manage value between them. And really our aha moment was we could decentralize the governance frameworks of how that interoperability works. Now, the beauty of what we can do with blockchain and blockchain adjacent technologies is that our data can be decentralized, our governance decentralized, our transactional and objects stores can be verified. And so when we think about who are you, well, that's one of the big areas of risk, civil attacks and identifying, people spoofing you, and so we can verify and create these universal IDs that can go across multi-systems. But then we needed to think about, what can you do? Policies. Now, policies are centralized. They're typically centralized, and again, it creates a problem. If I can get into the policy engine, even though I can I can see what who you are. I can create mischief by giving you access to things that you shouldn't have access to, and I need to be able to do it in a way that is decentralized and verified. And where can you do it? And with the beauty of blockchain and what we're able to pull together, creating these interoperable systems that verify, okay, I'm Ken, I can prove I'm Ken, I will always be Ken, and I can verify mathematically I am Ken. What can I do? Okay, I've got access to these rows, these fields, these columns on this system over here and this system over here. When we start thinking about running queries across SAP, Oracle, and JD Edwards in order to do consolidation, and it makes no sense to constantly create copies and copies and copies of data. We should just create interoperable governance, and this is really where we see it, and why we think it's a great use case. It's a great market sector for us because we can verify the data, we can verify the asset, we can verify the individual, and we can verify the policies and what that individual can do, and we can do it anywhere on anything.
Matthew, it's interesting because as you're talking, you asked me my story. I want to just a little ADHD moment, but so early in my career, when I was at Prodigy, I was introduced to a very brilliant man, Ken Magis, and he had this concept for protecting video at a time that this was a big issue, right? And it was a very simple concept, but it was acknowledged by all as a better version of encryption, because the traditional encryption was a mathematical envelope that if you could figure out how to open that envelope, the file was there. So one person opens the envelope, and the file is now in distributable form. Okay, in simple terms. But Ken Magis had a concept that was basically called hyper CD or hyperlock. And what he did is he said, well, if I remove, in the same way that you'll take a video file and you'll remove as much data from that file as possible, this is compression, and maintain the quality of the video file. Okay, so there's a bunch of compression codecs that do that. He said, what if we take the least amount of data from that file so that we collapse it and it's completely unusable, and we take that missing piece and we put it somewhere else. Distributed data.
Yeah.
Distributed data, okay? So now there's a parent and child requirement, okay? So we could distribute on a CD, for instance, the bulky part of a video file or a DVD. That's why Hyper CD and Hyper DVD were the early uses of it. But we could distribute the bulky part of the file, but that file was broken until you went over and you got the child pieces that enabled the file to play back again. And those child pieces became both a protection and an accountability for use of that file. A brilliant scheme, a brilliant approach, an acknowledged approach. And, nobody in the marketplace, it's a typical of the challenges in the marketplace, nobody really cared about the lock and key, the protection part of that. What they did like is we turned it into a marketing driver. So if you go to my website, you can play this video that sits on this disc. And now all of a sudden we created audience engagement, and that's how my whole career started. But I think when you start, it was at that moment that I think I was introduced to the power of distributed data, and then Hadoop distributed data. And there's all these little moments in my career where distributed data was something of a driver of the marketplace. And what you're talking about right now is 1,000% about the value of distributing that data, not making redundancy, and never leaving enough of it in one place that if someone hacks into that one location, they got the whole thing. The reality is, no, you got a piece of it, but that piece is worthless without this other piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece. It's all about distributed, value. So I love that about Instruxi's approach. I love that about how you've kind of constructed it so that it becomes this tool set that can be used for the creation of insurance solutions. And we've talked about the different industries that you've kind of enabled with this approach. And we're excited to get back to your point, Julia, to be the partner that enables the banking side of it, the mid-tier regional banking side of it, so that we can go in there with our banking understanding and our digital asset knowledge and say, how can we help construct your solution for what you're trying to accomplish right now? And using the tool set that's an invaluable way to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Speaking of data distribution, I think that'd be a great segue to talk about our most recent exciting development with Ion, being that y'all have become one of our preferred value-added resellers of our Instruxi Mesh ID technology. And this integration right now enhances Ion Digital's banking platform as a service and gold digitation capabilities. Matthew, do you want to talk about the more technical aspects of that?
I hope, because I couldn't.
Certainly. So what we've developed is a privacy-preserving digital distributed ID. So the goals that we were trying to achieve really is something that creates interoperability between Web 2 and Web 3. So, but we wanted to do it in a way where we we were not the recipients of the data, and so with our partners, we integrated Clear as the verifying engine. We worked with Space and Time and their ZK provers as a mechanism to both shard and store the data. So the ability to create a golden thread between your biometrics and your email and your enough data elements to represent you, and then we use chain link functions as a mechanism for distributing the verification status through the decentralized Oracle network. So effectively what we've created is a universal ID that can facilitate a KYC event under the control of the individual whose ID it is, that we see no data whatsoever. We participate only in the interoperability of moving keys from one side of the table to the other side. Not so much the controllers under your keys, but in terms of the facilitation of the information from one side of the table to the other, so that if you're on chain, you can facilitate today a KYC event before connecting to a platform. If you're off chain, you can create an authentication session using our policy engine to say that this person can have access to this system for this period of time. So the objective really was to create something that was universally applicable, interoperable, and again with the ability of tying policies, because ID is one thing and ID is incredibly important, but the ability to say, what can this person do? Can this person receive this asset? Can this person access this system? What fields in this system can this person access? So when we built the Instruxi data mesh, the thing that was missing was the verifiable ID and ensuring that you are who you say you are. And so we can inherit from enterprise authentication frameworks that are already in existence. So we can do mass uploads, or we can create KYC and ID events for new developers who are building applications from scratch.
And Julia, for us, I've already kind of touched upon the importance of KYC and AML at the foundational level of banking. But, our vision is to, facilitate global financial transaction networks that allow you to take your stored gold, the value of your digitized gold, and basically turn that into liquidity, into card systems, so you can use it basically worldwide, which is another revolutionary / evolutionary step to, not sitting with gold in your vault for the sole purpose of having the stability and the hedge against some of the more volatile currencies and other investment vehicles, but to actually, turn your stockpile of gold as the gold standard once did, into the foundation of your transactional day-to-day life. And so to do that, ID is essential. ID is the piece that, combined with a very distributed rules engine, allows us to create all sorts of scenarios that make sure that we're preventing the fraud and the financial crime that at times has hindered the explosion in popularity of crypto and some of the emerging tokenomics that are out there. Making sure that we have anticipated regulatory compliance, even though it's being defined on the fly. If you follow certain guidelines, you're going to always be close to matching the needs or requirements of that regulatory compliance, and ID is central to that. And making sure that any financial system that we create, whether it's for the digitization of gold or for the facilitation of digital asset transfer through a regional bank, that we're basically protecting that with the necessary security and identification characteristics that make sure that only the people that are supposed to get to that asset can get to that asset, and only the people that are allowed to facilitate that transaction can facilitate that transaction. All of that fundamentally relies on this incredibly next generation ID construct. And that is what we are excited about in our relationship with that product itself, is that not only can we utilize it to bring even further enhancements to what we've done already with our in situ gold digitization, but also to kind of be a augmentation and expansion of the stability of our banking SaaS banking platform. So, we're excited because it becomes an invaluable tool for what we're trying to accomplish in the creation of these global financial secure networks, if you will, or ecosystems. And I think as long as we keep that mindset and the relationship intact, we kind of have the perfect duo between Instruxi's innovative approach towards data, or plumbing, if he wants to call, as Matthew loves to call it. And if we're building houses and hotels that need that plumbing, then we're the perfect marriage, and that's how we look at it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Ken. I
that was
think from a
great.
use
Thank you
case.
both for
Sorry, Julia.
highlighting. No, that's okay. You want to finish that thought, Matthew?
Yeah, so I think to put the abstract into real world use case. So verifying who you are, as you said, verifying the transaction. I mean, when something simple like wiring instructions. So firstly, are you a real person? So our ID solves that. We can guarantee that you're a real person, that your wallet is real, and we can verify that. But is the wiring instructions that you have sent the correct wiring instructions? Do you have the authority to provide those wiring instructions? For me as the recipient, do I have the authority for that amount of money? Am I the person you should have sent those wiring instructions to? These are really basic problems that we see every day.
Trust.
We've got huge
Trust.
amounts of fraud. Really easily solvable problems today with this framework. We can verify who you are, whether you've got the authority to do what you're claiming to do. We can verify the recipient, whether they are allowed to receive the information. We can verify that the golden thread between the information hasn't been disturbed, disrupted with the correct signatures, and fix so many problems today. So many. Just simple things like sending over information that is up to date. I mean, my goodness, the amount of issues we even have in communicating with our attorneys and understanding. I get constant phone calls from people pretending to be my bank. I would like a way of verifying that. I would like a way of ensuring that the person that I'm speaking to is genuine, that can provide the information I need to prove that. So this is just really the beginning of what we can do in this industry to create verifiable proofs between the data, the person, and their authentication, or authorizations rather.
Yeah. I think those were some great highlights on how our Mesh ID works and what's really great about this partnership. So, with the time we have left, I'll start wrapping up. I want to thank you both for joining us today. We've covered an incredible journey from environmentally conscious virtual mining to some of our really cutting edge security solutions. I think this partnership between Ion and Instruxi really shows how innovation in baking can be both revolutionary and responsible. Because, I mean, at the base of this partnership, we're doing what Web3 and decentralization is based on. We're putting everyone on the same playing field. You know, y'all are giving these mid-tier banks the same access that they wouldn't have without infrastructure like we've built. Um, are there
And
any?
Julia, if I can be so bold, because we're at the end of this, and I just wanted to thank Instruxi for hosting and having us here, but also to let anybody and everybody that's listening. Ion is a public company. We you can get involved with this revolution because we have shares and you can you can invest in the company. It's IONI. It's right now it's a pink sheet over the counter stock that is moving quickly into a new classification. We feel that 2025 is going to be an incredible growth year for us with what we're doing. And a lot of that, it can be attributed to the partnership that we have with Instruxi. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing my job as a CMO as well as to promote iondigitalcorp.com, so that you can learn a little bit more about who we are, what we are, but also, stay tuned to the changes that are happening in the marketplace because it seems like every month there's a new way for our partnership to blossom into value. And that includes, by the way, the incredible partners like Chainlink, Space and Time, ZK Sync, all of the different partnerships that have been formed and are being formed to take this concept and construct to the next level.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Ken. And let me just echo back, thank you for your support over these years. And it's been a great partnership, and I hope many more years to come. Well, we're planning on it.
Here, here.
Yes, we love having you around, Ken. For anyone who was listening and had questions and didn't have a chance to ask them in the chat, I'm not seeing any in the Riverside chat or on X right now, but I would highly encourage you to click our link tree link in the X bio. It's also on our website. There you can find where you can join our Discord, and we have a growing community in there that Matthew and Austin participate in regularly, where they can definitely answer any questions that you have in our general chat. And yeah, I just want to thank you both, Ken and Matthew, for speaking with us today.
Always a pleasure. And anytime you need a fill in, if someone doesn't show, just give me a call and I can talk, about that topic
Thanks.
too. We
And
can
and
cover
the
some
next
ground.
time I'll put a shirt on, I promise. And
Yeah, could
I
you?
might
I
even.
mean, I really dressed up because of the English manner that
Yeah,
you
I
demand, and
really
then
wasn't expecting a video today. I'm sorry for
oh
being
well,
such a scruff, but I'm sure.
that's okay. If it makes you feel better, I'm not wearing pants, so that's good. So there you go.
Well, on that note, I'll go ahead
Where to
and end
go with
here.
that? Where to go with
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
You got
Okay.
to end on something that's memorable. Let's be
There you
honest.
go.
Let's go.
Always.
Yep, I agree. Okay, I'll end it here. Thank you guys.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You too.